If you are planning to fly during the COVID-19 pandemic, I am going to tell you the 5 things you need to know before you get on a plane. And make sure to watch until the end because I'm going to tell you whether I think it's worth it to splurge on a business class ticket or if you should save your money, honey. What is up, everyone? All right, so I just got back from Colorado, which was the first trip that I took since I began quarantining back in March. Wild and crazy. And you guys know, if you follow me on Instagram, that I was really hemming and hawing about this trip. Should I go? Should I not go? Should I fly? Should I drive? But rather than getting into the intricacies in this video of whether or not you should be leisure traveling right now, I did want to share some tips and observations for anyone who is going to be getting on a flight during the COVID-19 pandemic. If you do want to actually know a little bit more about my trip to Colorado, you can check out this post right here. Or you can also stay tuned to watch a video that I'm going to be putting out in the next coming weeks on my YouTube channel, kind of like a recap video of what we did. And so to make sure that you don't miss that video, make sure that you are subscribed and you hit that little bell button to get notified when I release a new video. My first observation is less of an observation and I guess more of a tip, and that is to get a COVID test before you fly. I think it is so important to make sure that you are not carrying the virus with you when you get on a plane full of strangers who are relying on you to make a decision that hopefully will not negatively impact them. So I'm going to explain how all of this worked, but I do want to say that everyone's situation is different and I am just sharing what worked for me as an Illinois resident with health insurance and a primary care doctor. So at first I tried to get a test at CVS, and what you have to do is answer some of their questions to see if you qualify for a test. I did not. So I called my doctor, explained the situation, told her I was going to be flying and that I wanted to know whether or not I had the virus before I got on the plane. She ordered the test and that was that. So that actually meant that I got to go to a private testing site where you do need a doctor order, but I didn't need to make an appointment and I really didn't have to wait that long. Another thing that I noticed was when I was looking at my state testing sites where you don't need a doctor's order, the turnaround time for getting test results was about 7 days, but when I went through my doctor, it was around 3 to 4 days. But actually, when I got to the testing site, they told me that it would actually be around 36 hours to know my results. So it's very important to find out the turnaround times in your particular state. Here's where it gets a little bit tricky. You have to time out your test without really being 100% sure when you're gonna get your results. So here's what I would do. As soon as you have your flight booked, get in touch with your doctor or figure out your state's testing location turnaround times, and then back time that test result to when you actually leave for your flight. And if there is possibly going to be a window between when you get your results back and when you get on the plane, try to stay at home as much as possible. I will say that personally the test was not a big deal at all. And I do know that everyone has different pain levels, but for me, this was something that I think is extremely important to do before traveling. So whatever pain or discomfort I did have was worth it in the end. I know this will come as a shock to all of you, but I am not a doctor, nor am I a coronavirus expert. However, I have gotten the test, and if you do have any questions with regards to the test, I will do my best to answer them. So just drop them in the comments section and yep, I'll get to them. Okay. Observation / tip number 2 is to be prepared for changes. You know, the last thing I want to do right now is to make sweeping statements about the airline industry as a whole. Everyone's experience flying right now is going to be entirely dependent on where they are traveling from, where they are traveling to, what airline they're on, what time they're leaving. Like, there are so many different variables. So what I'm going to talk about right now is just my experience flying from Chicago O'Hare International on United Airlines to Denver International. When you're checking your bags in Chicago, the experience was pretty much the same. But in Denver, it was completely touchless, which was Honestly, so cool. Quite literally, the entire process was touchless. Like, you didn't have to touch a screen, you didn't, you know, come into close contact with the person who was working at the desk, taking your bags. It was fantastic. And I asked the lady who was helping me, who worked for United, I was like, are more airports gonna be doing this? And she's like, I think that Denver is kind of like beta testing this process. So fingers crossed we will see more of this at airports across the country, but I believe Denver was one of the first airports to implement that. Another thing you should be prepared for is restaurants to be closed. And what I mean by that is any of the restaurants where you would typically sit down and maybe kill time before flights, those, for the most part, in Chicago and at Denver were closed. However, the magazine shops where you would, I don't know, grab a water bottle or a snack or a magazine, those are open. If you have lounge access, be aware that not all lounges are open. And you can just check your respective airline app or keep an eye on the signs that are posted in the airport because they are everywhere. I got a lot of questions about the whole mask situation. Pretty much you're gonna be wearing your mask from the moment you step into the airport to the moment you get off the plane and leave the airport in your next destination. And while you're going through security, just be aware that you will be keeping your mask on, but once you get up to the TSA agent who's checking your ID and your boarding pass, they will ask you for like a brief moment to take your mask down and then put it up again before continuing through security. Don't assume that the airport is going to be dead. I mistakenly made that assumption in Chicago and was unpleasantly surprised when I got to my gate. More on that in just a little bit. Be prepared for meal services to be completely canceled or just a little bit different. On my outbound United flight in premium economy, we got these little kind of like snack bag things, which had water, pretzels, a hand sanitizing towelette, and those waffle things that are so good, and I always forget the name of them, but United is known for having them. However, on some airlines, the offerings are completely different. So just check with the airline that you booked with prior to getting on the flight. Okay guys, we are about halfway through the video and I gotta know, what are your thoughts on air travel right now? Are you maybe considering getting on a plane? Have you flown? Are you like, heck no, absolutely not, not happening? Let me know your opinions. Just drop them in the comments below. I am so curious to hear what you guys think and what your opinions are. Observation number 3 is that social distancing is virtually impossible throughout the entire flying experience. No matter how often airport officials, flight attendants said, remain 6 feet apart, some instances it just wasn't a reality, and other times, my fellow travelers, it just wasn't a concept that they could grasp. Example number 1, in Chicago, as I was going through security, I had people literally standing directly behind me as I loaded my bags onto the x-ray machine. And so you can try to do that little like dance to kind of move away from people, but you don't have that much space to work with. It is a little bit on TSA to remind everyone, hey, 6 feet apart is a good idea. Might not hurt anyone, but it's also on us to kind of stand back and give people space. Here's another example. If you're on a pretty full flight prior to boarding, expect to see large crowds at the gate. And while all of this is contingent on the layout of the gate at the airport you're in, you know, Americans have this really nasty tendency of just kind of crowding the gate prior to boarding. I mean, we've all seen it happen. People start to like inch closer and closer and closer, and then you find out that they're in boarding group number 6, but they're right up at the line when they start boarding first class. You guys all know what I'm talking about. So I had hoped that that wouldn't happen during a pandemic, but I guess bad habits die hard. What's that saying? Old habits die hard? Something like that? Yep. Once you're on the plane, you are completely at the mercy of the airline, whether they've decided to keep the middle seat open, whether they've decided to fill the flight, and really if the passengers around you decide to respect your space. And finally, my last example, I know there's a lot, you'll notice that people do that crowding thing again at the baggage carousel. Everyone crowds right up. They have to get their bags so quickly. So again, my advice would be hang back, let those people grab their bags, keep your eyes on your bag, and just get it once the crowds have kind of dispersed a little bit. All of these examples lead perfectly into my observation number 4, which is your safety is entirely dependent on the travelers around you. And this was a huge one for me, and honestly the thing I had the biggest issue with throughout my flying experience, so just bear with me. So we as individuals can do everything in our power to follow the rules, take extra precautions, get tested, do everything in our power to minimize our impact on others. However, if the other people we are traveling with are not doing the same thing, or are simply unable to follow simple directions and rules, then that puts our safety at risk. And mainly what I'm talking about is this. When getting off the plane in Denver, the United flight attendant got on the speaker and asked everyone to remain in their seats until their row was called to officially deplane. Well, clearly based on that video, that did not happen. Let's talk about what you can do if this happens on your flight. First, I would advise getting a window seat. That puts you the furthest away from the aisle and furthest away from the crazy people who cannot listen to directions. And then what I would do is honestly remain in your seat until there's kind of a break in the line of people and you can safely get up into the aisle, grab your bags, and exit the plane. When I shared this experience on my Instagram stories, a lot of people wrote in and said that the flight attendant should have mandated that no one is getting off the plane until they follow the rules. And while that sounds great in theory, I reached out to a few of my flight attendant friends who said their job is to inform and not enforce. And so really what it comes down to is individuals following rules, being able to listen to directions, and giving respect to flight attendants for just the few small simple things that they ask that will ultimately keep everyone safe. And while I would love to be hopeful that we can follow rules, but right now in America, we are still debating whether or not wearing a mask is violating our individual freedoms. So my faith in people being able to listen to directions and keep their butts in seats until their row is called is pretty non-existent. So this brings me to my last observation, which is kind of an interesting one. And that is, flying business class isn't always a better option. Let me explain, and also let me make sure to make it clear that all of this is entirely dependent on what type of aircraft you're on, what airline you're flying with, how full the flight is, where you're going, and where you're coming from. While I was checking in for my return flight home from Denver to Chicago, I noticed that I was on a 777, which is typically an aircraft that flies internationally and has a business class section with fully reclining seats. Now, it was $179 to upgrade, which in my opinion was a pretty great deal, so I figured, what the heck, let's just see what this experience is like to be able to compare it to economy and premium economy. And while some aspects of the experience were nice, meaning you board first, there's comfier seats, they serve alcohol and these little snack boxes, there were TVs with a great movie and show selection, but, I was sitting elbow to elbow with complete strangers on my flight, which was not the case in premium economy because the middle seat was kept open. And now in the configuration of the aircraft I was on for business class, the way it worked was there was a 2-person seat on one side, another 2-person seat on the other side, and then in the middle there were 4 seats. And I guess I figured, and this is, you know, my bad, that there would be some sort of kind of like screen or separation between the 4 seats that were right next to each other. That was not the case. Moral of the story, if you're traveling with another person and you can snag 2 business class seats right next to each other, then I say totally go for it. But if you're like me and you're traveling solo and you might have to sit next to complete strangers really close, like elbow to elbow, then I might say it's not exactly worth it to upgrade. So what I would say is, if you have the option, be sure to check out a website like Seat Guru or maybe even the Points Guy, when you can see the aircraft you're flying on and the seat configuration to be able to make that determination. And really it's just kind of like what makes you feel most comfortable. For me, it was a 2-hour flight. Was it worth it to have some great snacks and some wine and a comfy chair? maybe, but I also didn't really like sitting very close to other people when I actually had the middle seat open in premium economy. So it's a decision you'll have to make for yourself, but I just wanted to share that. And again, entirely dependent on how full the airplane is. It probably makes a difference as to whether or not you're gonna be sitting next to someone in business class. All right, so I'm gonna leave you with this super annoying parting sentiment. That being, I cannot tell you whether it is a good idea or not for you to get on a plane right now. Ultimately, that's going to be a decision you're going to have to make for yourself. And I fully admit to the fact that I am a super anxious traveler right now, more so than I've ever been before. And in normal times, my experience on both of these flights would have been lovely. But unfortunately, we're not in normal times. There is no vaccine right now. There is no guarantee that you won't get coronavirus if you get on a plane. And I think these are all risks that we as travelers are gonna have to weigh before we make decisions about how we're gonna travel moving forward. And I am keeping my fingers crossed that airlines are gonna continue to innovate and continue to keep safety at the forefront of the conversation. I mean, they're gonna have to if they wanna stay in business. And so if there is any information or any updates that I get, I will continue to share that both on my Instagram and on YouTube as well. So make sure you're following me on IG, and also make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, as I'll be putting out more updates and videos in the weeks and months to come. So, also too, if there was any question that I might not have answered in this video or something I didn't talk about, make sure to drop it in the comments below, and I will do my very best to answer all of your questions. And if you liked this travel video and you want to watch more of my travel content, I believe there will be more videos popping up here, I don't know, somewhere. Click them, watch them, do all the things, get some travel inspiration for when we can travel internationally again. And I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching, and I will check ya next week. Peace. Peace out.